you don't like me, don't tell your friends. But I was born in the top of a double house on West 77 in inner city Cleveland. And then we moved to a suburb called Parma. And if you know anything about Parma, it's the seventh biggest city in the state, but it's like a giant tract home. It's all kind of teachers and firemen and policemen, and it was a great place to grow up. Great place. My dad was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach, and he was a well-known wrestling coach. And our family was about sports, and we had 4 kids in the family. And my dad, first of all, my dad was the best man I've ever known. He was an incredible guy, and he achieved his American dream, that it wasn't about money. And he's still the winningest coach in Ohio history. And he was a world-class athlete. And I don't say that lightly. He was a 3-time All-American and NCAA champion at Michigan State. At one point was ranked #1 in the world. He was champion of everything. In every sport, I had to learn how to be humble at a very young age. No matter what he did well. And but our environment was about sports. In fact, I was a little unusual in the sense that I did pretty well academically, and my dad would kind of look at me maybe a little suspiciously. And I can tell you that my entire life with him, he never once asked me what was on my report card, because he usually knew what would be there. But I think at least that's what he told me in later life. But he only asked me what happened at practice. And so I was required to play sports. But, my dad, as I said, achieved his American dream. He was a very well-known coach. He did really well. But we had 4 kids in the family. And as a teacher and a coach, in the early years of his coaching, he didn't even get paid to coach. And that took up most of his time. And so he always had to have 2 full-time jobs. And I tell this story because it was kind of a seminal event in my life. And it just kind of hit me in the face. And my dad taught me about personal responsibility, taught me what the meaning of character and integrity is. And so I always tell this story because it changed my life. But when I was in college, my dad always had a second job. He got home at 10 o'clock at night. Came in handy because I convinced Diane everybody came home at 10 o'clock at night and from work, and it allowed me to really work hard and do well in my business. So it worked out well with that. But anyway, I was in college, and I got a call in the hallway. Back then there were no cell phones. I took the payphone. My mother was on the phone, and she was crying. I immediately recognized that, and I said, "What is wrong?" And she said, "Your dad lost his job." My dad would go from teaching to coaching to running a recreation center at night, and he'd get home at 10 o'clock. And so I was used to that, and I said, "Was everything okay?" And she said, "No, it's not." So I came home for Christmas break, and it was cold out, and I walked in the house, and I said, "Where's Dad?" And she said, it was probably 9 o'clock at night. I said, "Where's Dad?" She said, "He's working." And I said, "Well, where?" And she gave me the address of a car wash in Rocky River, Ohio. Now, my dad was on the front cover of the sports section pretty much all during wrestling season. To many people, he's still the dean of Ohio wrestling. He had great teams, and he was somebody that people knew. So I went to that car wash, and I walked in the front of that place, and there was a car coming out of the blower, steam all over the place, cold night, and there was my dad wiping down bumpers. And it kind of hit me at that point. My dad was in trouble financially at that point. The bills had to get paid. He didn't ask anybody for any help. He didn't ask the government for help. He didn't care that he would be seen wiping down bumpers at a car wash. He only cared about one thing, his family. And it frankly, blew me away that I knew he was a great guy, but I found it literally a life-changing experience. And I got in the car after I visited with him, and he was going to come home a little after I did, and I kind of changed my whole attitude about school, about where I wanted to, what I wanted to do, and I wanted to change that, and I have. And so I learned about work at an early age. I had, I think a lot of people appreciate this, but my grandfather was the president of the Laborers Union in Cleveland, if you know anybody. And Diane, and by the way, that's my wife Diane over there. She is the most patient woman in the world. She's not very big, but she's very strong. You don't mess with her. Diane and I went down to visit him in Pensacola where he was training. And as I said, I was bursting with pride. But, you know, when we walked out, Diane and I were going back to the airport, and I said, Diane, I've got to do something. I said, my son is now going to be risking his life every day for this country. We started with nothing, and look where we are. And but for this great nation we live in, we wouldn't be able to do this. I've got to do something. So I had been, as I mentioned, involved in the Trump campaign. A lot of those people ended up in administration. A lot of them were recruiters and things. And I went and looked for a job in Washington. And Diane said, just calm down, we'll handle this, you know, don't get all worked up. So I went to Washington, got offered a couple jobs, or actually got offered one job. And I'm going to tell you because it was, I guess, pretty funny. I was offered the number 2 job in the SBA, which I didn't want. But then I went to HHS. Maybe this give me an indication of what I think about the government's involvement in healthcare, education, and everything else they should be involved in. But they said, what can we tell you about HHS? And I said, well, I know enough about it to know that it probably shouldn't exist. This was a very short interview. And I went on to the Commerce Department, which probably should exist. If you remember, the Secretary of Commerce was Wilbur Ross. I had known him in past transactions that we had worked on. And I am told, he's never told to me personally, but I was told by the recruiters, hey, Mike, you're his favorite. You got to do this. You got to do this. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do it. And most of the time we spent on how I had to do various things in my personal life to get through the Senate confirmation here. I found ultimately it was impossible. They wanted me to change the name of the firm that I've spent 30 years building into the top, one of the top names in the U.S. I would have hurt my partners. They wanted me to sell assets that in a fire sale, put it in a blind trust and then selling it. I said, well, I can put everything in a blind trust. They said, no, you got to sell it. So I can't do that. I'll hurt my partners. It's not time to sell everything, especially in a fire sale or 90 days or whatever. But that's what they originally said. You got to sell everything in 90 days. I said, no, I can't do that. Apparently Wilbur did. But I gave up. Came home, very disappointed. I didn't realize, I don't know how people go into government service that have any complexity in their personal life. And I had a fortunate occurrence. I had somebody call me, actually the managing partner of Grant Thornton in Cleveland, called me and said, Mike, we're going to have a bunch of CEOs come down, we're going to listen to Sherrod Brown. So I went down in our building, so I went up a couple floors and there he was, and we sat there, and I sat there and listened to a man in 40 minutes of the total delusion. This man represents Ohio, but this man doesn't understand what families care about. He doesn't understand how our economy works. He doesn't understand how jobs are created. He does not understand human nature. And I walked out of there afterwards, and I just was like, in fact, he had his economic advisor with him. And I walked up and I said, did you ever teach this guy anything about economics? He goes, listen, I just work for him. I don't have to agree with him. I mean, he literally, even the people who work for him were like, okay, fine. He's not always rational. So I walked out there and I was literally angry. And I had an opportunity to have breakfast with the chair of our party in Cuyahoga County, a guy named Rob Frost. I said, Rob, this guy shouldn't be representing Ohio. He's so far left, he's off the page. And he goes, well, we have Josh Mandel, and he's going to beat him. I said, he got beat in 2012 quite handily, and I've looked at the research, and Josh has about a 4% chance, if you look at history, of beating him the second time. I said, why haven't you found somebody that's better? And I said, I've also looked at the at the debates, and it was like some college professor debating his grandchild. And I said, he can't win. He goes, well, we're very positive on it, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, and he said, well, you find me somebody that wants to run. So I talked to a bunch of people that were in a position to do something like this. I said, why don't you run? You can win. And he said, Mike, are you crazy? We would never run for office. If you think it's such a great idea, you do it. So I did. So in 2018, I ran for office. I got in late. I didn't win. And I have to tell you, the Republican Party was dead set against me. They said they weren't going to be. And as soon as I was starting to nip at the heels of the people, they jumped on me and basically cut my legs out from under me. But I still won 38 counties and 32% of the vote. For somebody that nobody knew, and I'm told I did okay. And I didn't think I'd ever run again. In fact, it was kind of a bad experience, largely because of the party. And then when Rob Portman decided to step down, I had a lot of people who maybe the last time told me I shouldn't run, telling me I should run. But what I found was one thing. People are tired of career politicians. They're tired of political speeches. They're tired of people that go to Washington and start a career, say they're going to do a bunch of stuff and never do it. I think they want somebody with the kind of experience I have, and I think 32% of the vote proved that, even with, by the way, Donald Trump campaigning for my opponent, which, by the way, he had no idea about. And when I confronted him with him, he kind of went, I did what? And he was told to go to the state and get this and support this guy, because that's what he was told. There's 50 states. This guy can't handle everything. I'm going to be with him in a couple of days. I don't care if he endorses me. I think I probably deserve it more than the other people, but I just don't want him to endorse somebody else. And I've shown him loyalty. He did all that and campaigned against me, yet I gave him a larger donation in 2020. So I think he understands how I feel about him. And I think personal loyalty to him is pretty important. So we'll see what happens. But in this campaign, I started out, you would think with 32% of the vote, I'd have better than 2% name recognition, and that's where I started this time. But things have evolved. Initially, that could happen again. Wouldn't it be great to send a U.S. Senator to Washington representing this state that actually understood something about economics? I studied economics undergrad, I studied economics in graduate school, and I taught it at the graduate school level. You can take every book that I used and throw it right out the window, because they're not paying attention to it. We have a thing called wage push inflation, and when wage push inflation takes hold, we are going to have inflation for a time period to come, and they're going to have to crank interest rates up enough to cool this economy down, and we're going to have some sort of a self-imposed recession, and we're not going to get out of it. We ought to all be ready for it. So if you can refinance something that's floating rate, do it right now. I'm doing it. I think we all should do it, and get fixed rate until it passes. But I think we have too many people sitting in Congress, frankly, that are lawyers. I have never looked at a lawyer. I don't know many lawyers that I would ever consult for any type of financial information, because they don't know what they're doing. And that's what makes up our legislatures. We need some business people. We need some people that have studied these things, that can actually counter the argument of some staffer from some Democrat senator that says there's no problem with inflation and look at these numbers. I'll read the numbers. I know how to read the numbers. That's what I've been doing my whole life. So that's a problem. But I'm going to tell you now about what I consider the greatest risk we have. When Bolsheviks took over Russia in 1917, there were 200,000 Bolsheviks in a country of 143 million people. 100 million people died as a result. We have a lot more woke people in this country as a percentage of our country than they did during the Bolshevik Revolution. And that philosophy is equally dangerous as Marxism. What it is rebate Marxism. I studied it. My other major in college was political philosophy. We studied postmodernism when I was there. We thought it was a joke. It has now overtaken all our colleges. It's flowed into our big business. It's flowed into our media, and now they're trying to teach it to our children. We have to stop it. We do have the First Amendment, so we can't tell them to stop saying it. But what we have to have is we have to educate ourselves on all these issues and be able to counter the argument with the truth. The crux of this theory, and it's a theory to the point of almost being a religion. I think you could almost attack it on a First Amendment basis as some state-authorized religion. I mean, it's happened in the military now. It's everywhere. But the belief is that you divide the country and all people up by their identity. And white people are the culprit. And everybody else, pretty much every identity group that the Democrat Party tries to get voting for them, are the oppressed, and we're the oppressors. I don't know what the end game was. There was never an end game to Marxism, other than maybe Civil War and what happened in the Soviet Union. That's what the end game is here too. There's no good reason for this, even if it was true, and I don't believe it is. But even if it was true, why would you want to talk about it? Because it could only end up badly. Only. It's going to end badly. We need to counter with the truth. This country is not systemically racist. This country was making incredible progress until Barack Obama became president, and then it all turned. And now it's gotten worse and worse. There's nothing more dangerous to this country. And the way you can help, the way you can get involved, is make sure when you're electing somebody to the school board that those people aren't crazy woke people that believe in CRT is what we call it, or wokeism, and make sure of that, because they're now teaching to our kids. I believe that a lot of people will come out of college, and because I know I went to school with a lot of liberals, and a lot of them aren't liberal anymore because they grew up. And I believe a lot of people will do that. But when you start indoctrinating people at 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 years old, it's too late. It's too late to get them off that. It's going to become part of their lives. The idea is to train everybody as an activist with only one thing in mind, and we can't let that happen. And the only way we can control it is electing school boards that can fire the superintendents, that can fire and put a superintendent in, they'll fire the diversity consultant. We've taken personal responsibility, the power of the individual, free markets, and we turned it into diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would like to take the word equity out of every single governmental document there is, because it's meaningless, but for the fact it really means racism. We got to get it out. They're teaching equity everywhere. Equity is not equality. Our country is based on equality before the law. And we need to emphasize that. We need to make sure that happens. So I don't believe that we can entrust this nation to another career politician. And there's a few of them I'm running against. Or party insider, again, running against those people. Or somebody who puts their finger in the air to find out what they're going to say next. I'm running against those people too. So read the resumes of the people I'm running that are running for this office. There's a whole football team running. Well, actually, I can't say that anymore. There was 11, now there's 10. But there's a whole almost a football team running, one man down, and there's a lot of choices. Do your homework. Figure out what these people are all about. See what they've accomplished in their lives. See if they've ever accomplished anything in their lives. Make sure they have experience in all areas of life before they want to go to Washington and make our rules. And then pick the right one. And I hope you pick me. I think you should. And I love your vote and your support. I've got signs. I've got stickers. And I would like you to tell your friends if you like me, and not tell your friends if you didn't. So thank you very much, and I'd love to take questions. I'm much better at questions than I am at talking. So.
I've got one.
Yes.
What have you heard about getting control of the elections themselves so that there's integrity in our elections?
Well, we have 40 plus states that have changed the rules, and we believe will end up controlling the next elections. I mean, Georgia, where there was obviously a problem because we watched it on television. And my wife always brings this up, and I said, listen, we all have to vote. Even if we think there might be some shenanigans going on, we need to vote. We can't, that's what happened in Georgia. Somebody said, don't vote because it's fixed. And we lost 2 Senate seats. We need to get out and vote. And we need to get all our friends that don't vote out and vote. This country is in peril, and we need to do it. In 1992, there was a commission that studied our elections here in this country. It was headed up by Jimmy Carter. He's hardly a Republican. But the findings of that commission, the most important finding was mail-in ballots are a license for fraud. And that's, I believe, what happened. In fact, I haven't actually found anything I disagreed with him on lately. And I think if you doubt my conservative credentials, the fact that Rand Paul has endorsed me, he doesn't do this willy-nilly all over the United States. The fact that he's done that should be enough to quell any doubts you may have, because he knows me pretty well. You know, we talk a lot about this stuff. So I want you to know that. So did I answer the question? I mean, I'm not sure they're fair, but I think a lot of the laws that have been passed in a lot of these states have been directed at trying to make sure they're fair the next time. So I'm hoping 2022 will be that way, because I think we're going to have a red wave. And if we get the kind of majority we can, and we could actually overturn a presidential veto, we can do a lot of great stuff. Let's talk about shutting down the entire Department of Education, for instance. We have 5,000 people in Washington in the Department of Education getting paid a lot of money, and not one of them's ever educated a kid. And look at our educational system. In every major city, it's a disaster. And it's, right now, their job is a top-down approach to equity. That's not the word we want to hear. I want to get rid of it. There's a lot of things we can. We can get rid of the Department of Energy. We can slim this government down if we get the kind of majority that will allow us to get it through. And we're going to have to beat a lot of Republicans over the head to get it done.
We had our big event. You mentioned, like you said, that we need people that know a lot about business, and that Biden's cabinet has 0.6 months total average of business experience.
Case in point.
Months.
And Steve's endorsed me also. He's a good guy. So I get to talk about economics with Steve.
Mike, do you share Rand Paul's opinion of Anthony Fauci?
Yes, I do. I think Anthony Fauci lied to Congress. I think there was gain of function research. He knew there was, and he basically lied to Congress. And I can't believe, unless you're a Democrat, you don't get away with things like that. And this guy's a Democrat. He's a bureaucrat. He's not a... I think COVID's over. I really do. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but first of all, I always felt it was a matter of personal responsibility. If you had a comorbidity, or you're a certain age, or you had diabetes, or whatever, you should have stayed home. And I have friends that have died, good friends, but it was still their personal responsibility to stay away. Masks don't work. There's one study out there that say a cloth mask works in any way, shape, or form, and yet it's now become a status symbol for the left to wear it, or some sort of a cultural symbol that they're carrying, or whatever. It doesn't work. The fact that we have little kids suffering with masks on is a complete joke. Now, I got the vaccination, and I'll tell you why I got the vaccination. It was a personal decision. My wife's mom is 94 years old, and my wife is one of her caregivers. And And I have my best friend from college. He was president of the Ohio Medical Association. He played cornerback behind me. And he's an interesting guy.
I had the same shock. So I guess what I'm wanting to know is like, you know, like you're saying, trying to show that conservative thread. It's like I looked at other candidates like Mandel, and it's like I remember 2012. So it's like it's a completely different campaign from what.
Obviously, Rand and I have a pretty close bond already. I'd like to see the equivalent of a Freedom Caucus in the U.S. Senate, and I'm going to be part of that. So, and